One of the great companies that quietly moves the world's trade, the invisible giant behind something like a fifth of all the shipping containers on Earth, is suddenly struck by a single piece of malicious software. And within just a couple of hours, the whole enormous thing goes completely, utterly dark. 45,000 of its computers wiped clean in moments. Its entire digital brain, the one master record of where every single steel box on the planet actually is, simply gone. And it would go on to survive all of this only because of one single, forgotten copy sitting in one remote office, saved purely by blind accident. This is the story of Maersk, and the day it was very nearly switched off forever. Here is the pattern worth learning. Call it the backup you forgot is the one that saves you. Because the true disaster, when it finally comes for you, will almost always be the one that you never once thought to model. So you must keep one real, true copy of whatever matters most somewhere far outside the blast radius, disconnected, switched off, somewhere else entirely. Because real resilience is never actually the absence of failure. It is simply having somewhere left to restart from. But first, understand just how much was at stake. This old Danish company had taken a simple steel box and turned it into nothing less than the circulatory system of all global trade. The box itself was not its invention. That had come decades earlier from an American trucking man back in the 1950s. But Maersk had mastered the sheer scale of it, running hundreds of vast ships into some 130 different countries. When you buy almost anything at all, the odds are very good that it once rode inside one of its containers. And then came the day itself. In 2017, a piece of malware, later known as NotPetya, came tearing without warning through the company's entire network, spread through a hijacked software update over in Ukraine. In roughly 2 short hours, the company that moves a full fifth of the world's trade went totally and completely dark. The gates simply froze solid at dozens upon dozens of its ports. And think for a moment about the sheer scale of that silence. A single ship carrying up to 20,000 containers was arriving at one of its ports somewhere roughly every 15 minutes. And the systems that alone knew what was actually inside all of those boxes and precisely where each one was supposed to go next had now simply ceased to exist. The company had, in effect, been quietly deleted from the face of the earth. Now, they did have backups of their servers. But here was the truly terrifying part. They had no working backup of the one thing that actually ran the entire network. The domain controllers, which held the master record of the whole network's very identity. They had all been constantly synchronizing with each other, and so they had all been wiped out together in the very same instant. And without them, every other backup they had was now completely and utterly useless. There seemed, in that dark moment, to be no clean way left at all. No way to rebuild a global network of that staggering size back up again from absolutely nothing. But then came the one accident that quietly saved everything. It turned out that a single domain controller sitting in an office all the way over in Ghana had been knocked completely offline by a local power blackout just moments before the malware had struck. And so it had simply sat there, disconnected and entirely untouched, still holding one clean and perfect copy of the network's whole identity. The one single machine that nobody had ever thought to protect on purpose had now become the entire lifeboat. And so the staff, by every account, had to physically carry that precious data out to rejoin the others, and then rebuild the whole global backbone painstakingly from that one lone surviving copy. In only about 10 days, the core of the network was somehow back on its feet. And all through the long blackout, people had simply run the entire business by hand, on their phones and on messaging apps and on plain paper. And they reportedly still kept very nearly all of the containers quietly moving. Now imagine instead that there had been no power cut that day in Ghana at all. That one machine would then have been wiped away along with all of the others. And the company's entire identity, that one irreplaceable record, would have existed absolutely nowhere on Earth. 10 days of recovery would have stretched into weeks or even months of total blackout right at the very core. Cargo would have rotted at the frozen gates, and the shippers of the world would have fled permanently to its rivals. Its survival, in the end, hung entirely on an accident, and not on any plan. And that, if we are honest, is the genuinely uncomfortable part of the whole story. In the end, the bill for it all came to somewhere around $250 million. But the company had lived, and it remains even today one of the two largest container lines anywhere on Earth, a quiet utility that the whole of world trade simply cannot function without. Look back now at the true shape of the thing. Every single one of its carefully planned defenses had failed completely and totally. And what actually saved it in the end was one humble copy that nobody had ever designed to be the lifeboat at all. A copy kept alive purely by chance, simply because it happened to be sitting quietly outside the blast radius. So here is the lesson worth keeping. Do not merely protect your system and then assume that you are safe. Go and keep one true copy of it somewhere that the disaster simply cannot reach. Because the one catastrophe that finally gets you will always be the one that you never thought to imagine. So ask yourself, honestly, if your entire world were to be wiped away tomorrow morning, is there one clean copy of it sitting quietly somewhere outside the blast radius that could one day bring the whole thing back to life?